So can you talk about that process of the creative process of knowing you went through a healing journey yourself and then trying to encapsulate that into a book that isn't actually your journey, but still gives the essence of it?
Very good question, or analogy. So I think what ultimately happened in my process was roughly about 10 years ago when I became very chronically ill with multiple diseases, the largest stemming from Lyme's disease. And as you know, there's a plethora of, that whole field of multiple ripple effects. The tornado goes off or the volcano explodes and it just keeps rippling, affecting. What happened in that process was I ultimately was led to the internal self after much of the external exploration in trying to seek treatment. I mean, it was a very daunting, very lonely journey through the healing. There's a big void that I was constantly trying to fulfill. And no matter how much healing I went through and protocols and treatments and therapies, and the list goes on and on and on, it was years and years of this, I was left with a void. And the one thing about working with your clinic and, your amazing protocols and just the mindset around how you approached healing was, first of all and foremost, the first place that I actually found a little bit of aha moment and the light come through, because I was in a dark tunnel. And it was pretty lonely in that time and that era of when I was hit with the Lyme's disease. It wasn't really spoken about so much. It was kind of foreign, and I was pretty alone in that field. I mean, there was a couple of pioneers who were working in coming forth and speaking about it, but very, very few. Not enough to offer any insight of like, oh my goodness, this is where I need to go. So when I found you guys and the holistic approach, this is what it was a trigger and an invitation to have a deeper insight to healing, but more so than the healing process itself, into my humanity as a human being in my totality, because I don't think I knew who I was. I don't like to speak on behalf of people, but I don't know if humanity really understands the essence of being a human being. And we often neglect the intelligence of that. And more than the intelligence, we neglect the totality of being, which means, like we had spoken about earlier, we can't just pump ourselves with medicines, techniques, cut open, like dismantle, build up again, if we're not working on all levels of self, because we're just going to keep hitting that wall. And that happened to me for many years. And the deeper into my sickness I got, the deeper into the crisis I got. The black hole and that void became very, very deep. And I didn't even have the claws to climb out anymore. I couldn't find that. So when I came to you guys, it was very interesting because as soon as I walked in, number one, I was treated as a human being, as like, oh, I have a name and this is where I come from and this is me in my totality. I'm not just another protocol or treatment in place with the same treatment that everybody else gets to the same diagnosis. It was an individual treatment because you were looking at me as a human being. You looked at my all aspects of self, from physical to mentality, and also to the energy side of myself. And this was very new in that time, coming into the world. Like there was bits and parts of it, but it wasn't so, first of all, widely accepted to be a healing method. And it wasn't so spoken. So when I started working on the energy side of myself, I started to have relief. And I started the healing process and the crisis started to disperse, because the quickening of what happens when you're working on an energetic level in the spiritual side really complements and marries the physical side of healing. So I couldn't take off into this higher aspect of healing if my body wasn't fully, in some sort of harmony or balance. So this is where your approach was really wonderful for me, because it hit every single angle. So as much as I wanted to climb into that spiritual enlightenment after I figured out that we do have this divinity within us and, tapped into that, it wasn't until I was able to find some harmony and balance in the physical essence of myself to be able to rid the burdens and that heavy weight that was holding me suspended within the container of my body, which was very limiting. I couldn't transcend into a higher state of healing. So this energy aspect and all these approaches that you offered was what brought me into it was one of the triggers that triggered, along with a few other things, this new discovery of myself. And I felt like a child going into discovery. So what happened was the pain and the suffering started to really transfer into a curiosity and a discovery that then transcended into discernment.